The Wild lose to the Stars in 6, so we turn the page to where do we go from here? We discuss as we wrap up the series on today's episode of Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day of the week. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss out on any of our new episodes throughout the week. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, Alex Micheletti joins us to recap the opening round series loss to the Dallas Stars. And we'll turn our attention to some of the players who may or may not be on this roster come next season. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, and we are joined by Alex Micheletti once again for a Micheletti Monday. Alex, I'm going to defer to you a few times to talk about the series because I broke things down from my perspective at length yesterday. In a bonus episode that the Everydayers heard and reacted to. Big day on YouTube in the comments yesterday, which we like. We love that. So let's just talk about this series against the Stars and what was the most disappointing part for you of seeing the Wild bounced in 6 games?
Yeah, I mean the top players they're nowhere to be found from the majority of the series. Very frustrating. You know, I know there's injuries, but to not get anything from Matt Boldy was very disappointing. Same thing with Kirill. I know he's not getting help on his line, but that was just tough because you see a guy like Rupe Hintz, and I think he ended up leading the first round in points, and it goes to show you how much this team desperately needs a number one center. It makes your team so much different, and he was the difference maker of the entire series. Him and Miro Heiskanen and our old friend Ryan Suter kind of just basically shutting down Kaprizov too. Those were some of the storylines for sure.
Yeah, missing Eriksson Ek, him being your number one center did hurt. And, that's one aspect of this series. The center depth obviously was a huge point of weakness in this series. The Stars dominated in the faceoff circle, which helped them set up things on special teams, both power play and penalty kill. And you look at it, like you hit it right on the head, is the top guys just were not there to the extent that the Stars top guys were. And it's frustrating because we talk about now having seen this for 7 consecutive postseasons. And I said it on yesterday's show. It looked a lot like what we saw last year, which I think makes this one even more frustrating this time.
Yeah, 100%. And, they start off the series with just such an emotional win in overtime with that Ryan Hartman goal. And then they decide to go to Marc-Andre Fleury in game 2, and they just completely kind of lost all momentum in the series, which is, you talked about it, just kind of a, spitting image of last year with the Blues making, wrong goalie choices at the wrong times. And, they just got flat out coached. And so that was really, really frustrating too. It seems like for whatever reason, Pete DeBoer has the magic elixir to take down the Wild, no matter what team he's coaching. And so, yeah, lots of interesting decisions to be made this summer in regards to coaching and what they want to do going forward.
Yeah, and we saw Jake Ottinger as the series went on. You saw guys too, a lot of just uncharacteristically missing shots, not even missing shots, missing the net in this series. I lost track of the number of times that you'd get like Kaprizov set up on a one-timer and it just wouldn't be anywhere close, or Zuccarello, or up and down the list. It just was it was a frustrating performance to say the least, but the Stars are the team that's moving on, and now they have an opportunity, as we'll talk about in a little bit, because the Colorado Avalanche lost, the Boston Bruins lost. There was a lot of chaos that happened throughout the course of this weekend, and so just what we see in playoff hockey is that what you wouldn't the Toronto Maple Leafs won a postseason series for the first time since 2004. So just about everything you wouldn't expect to see happens in just a great weekend of watching hockey.
Yeah, it was it was unbelievable. You take a look at a lot of those games and the intensity and the urgency in teams. I hope the Wild were watching. I hope the management was watching, coaching staff, because there was the teams are putting their bodies on the line to try to win. That incredible Florida Panthers team, they had penalties go against them, and they didn't just say we're finished. They stuck with it and pulled their goalie, tied it up, and then won in overtime. It was incredible watching a guy like Matthew Tkachuk just will his team to victories. He said in the locker room earlier in the series that boys, be ready to come back here for Game 7, and he called it and called his shot. And so yeah, that was incredible to watch. And Toronto, hopefully the Wild don't turn into Toronto where it's 19 years, so it's just incredible playoff so far, and it's only going to get better and better for sure.
Yeah, it's just beginning. Now, the big question, the one that I spent most of the show yesterday diving into, was, of course, the status of the coaching staff. Should there be big changes? Should there be some staff tweaks? I'm of the belief that I think you would have every reason to want to just make that big of a change. But what do you think? Do you think? And let's just put this out there, because this was brought up, and I think this is something that will factor in. The fact that Dean's got 2 years left on his deal, that's something that will play a role in what happens. But ultimately, do you think the Wild move on from the whole staff, the assistants? Do you think they do anything like that going into next season?
Yeah, I would think assistants. I don't know all of them, but at least one. Like you said, I don't think Craig and Leopold would want to have to pay Dean's 2 years and then the entire coaching staff, everybody on that coaching staff. That's a lot of money that I'm sure he doesn't want to deal with. But I mean, we could see, you can't win in the postseason if you're penalty kill and power play are some of the worst in all of the 16 teams that made it, because the games are so tight in the playoffs. And you take a look at Dallas; they took advantage on the power play to win them a couple games. And so there just has to be some type of change there. And it's not always the injuries that are affecting the power play. It's the schemes and zone entries. That there was just no adjustments. There was no adjustments at 5-on-5 or special or power play or penalty kill. There could have been some penalty kill changes, and just they kept throwing the same people out there. It was so frustrating because it was easy pickings for the Stars. They were doing a good job 5-on-5 with them, but then when it came to the power play, Dallas took advantage. I mean, Tyler Seguin went into the Joe Pavelski role, and he just completely dominated. It was something else to watch.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. Obviously, with it being Monday, when people are listening to this, it's possible that something has happened by the time you listen. And so if that is the case, there will be another episode, but we'll see what happens. Ultimately, it's Bill Guerin's call, but I would imagine he was not pleased with what he saw, especially to end that series. So we'll see what happens. The big thing that Guerin is going to have to weigh is who stays, who goes on the roster side. And so we'll flip our attention to that by going through some of the names of players that will stay, players that won't, players that should, players that probably shouldn't. We'll talk about all that as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Our next partner is a product that I use every single day of the week. That is AG1 by Athletic Greens. Maybe you're like me. You want to be healthy and eat well, but it's always easier said than done. That's no longer the case with AG1. With one delicious scoop of AG1 in a glass of water each day, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. It can be hard and expensive to keep track of multiple different supplements and vitamins, not to mention how hard it can be on your stomach. AG1 costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Continuing today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, thanks for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. For the everydayers, make sure that you tune in tomorrow as we continue to unpack what we saw in the series against the Stars and where we go from here. That'll be a week-long theme here on Locked on Wild. Joined by Alex Micheletti today. And Alex, let's start to push the conversation that way by taking a look at some of the players that will have their statuses decided. Unrestricted free agents, restricted free agents. Obviously, the big one is Filip Gustavsson. And we didn't know what to expect from Gus Bus when he came here before the season started. But boy, did he make an impression in his first real chance in the NHL. And rightfully so, he hiked that price tag up pretty good for what he did throughout the course of the season too.
Yeah, he saved the season. I remember us talking, the first couple of games of the season. It was like, did they make the right decision? I'll never forget that Avalanche game. What was it, like 6-0 or something like that? I was like, oh boy. And he proved me wrong. He proved a lot of people wrong. And he saved the season for them. There's no way they would have finished as high as they did without Gus. And so, yeah, every win towards the end of the season and made the price go up. And he's the number one guy they have to get figured out, because once they figure out his number, then they'll be able to see how much they have left for other guys. And so they have to get this one right. Hopefully they're able to re-sign him. Hopefully nobody offer sheets him, because that would be that'd be very interesting too. So that's another thing we have to keep an eye out for, what we love to call offer sheet season. So
yeah, we don't want the poison pill. That happened to the Vikings with the Seattle Seahawks, Steve Hutchinson, then Sidney Rice. So we don't need the offer sheets. Let's stick with the goalies, because this one is an interesting discussion piece as well. Marc-Andre Fleury, he has 1 year left on his deal, and from the sounds of it in comments after the series, he is coming back, but this will probably be his final go around. So, do we see Fleury in a Wild uniform, or do we see Bill Guerin maybe? I don't know if Pittsburgh would bite, but maybe give him that opportunity then for that farewell tour with the Pittsburgh Penguins before he hangs it up. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that they put him in for that third period. Then this was before he told, the reporters after the game that he wanted to play one more year. I just thought it made no sense for him to play the third period. So I thought this was like his swan song to, get one last go at it. But, he wants to play. It would be so nice to get that $3 million off the books. So, if it's not Pittsburgh, hopefully, there's probably going to be some other teams that would love to have him in the room. He's such an amazing locker room guy, and so and then give Wallstedt a chance to be the backup to Gus, have that Swedish combo as a tandem. That would be so nice. Just with the cap crunch they're in. I know he doesn't want to move his family, but it would be very enticing to get him back to Pittsburgh and to get him back with Letang and Crosby and Malkin, where they had that amazing run all together there. It would be quite the story. And the Pittsburgh, one of the major factors of them not making the playoffs was their goaltending. Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith were awful. So, I could definitely see Bill, talking him into that, especially with all, with Bill's history with Pittsburgh too. So
yeah,
it'd be interesting.
It's a situation too where he may not want to relocate it, but it probably is a little easier to do if you are in the mind frame of this is it. Like this is going to be the last ride for Fleury. We'll see though.
Yeah.
Guerin obviously likes him a ton, and he has had a huge impact, I think, on what we've seen from Filip Gustavsson. So if the money doesn't come from there, it's going to have to come from somewhere else. Let's look at some of the guys that were brought in for the trade deadline. Of course, John Klingberg played in the final few games of the year, played in the postseason. Do you think we see him back? I know his cap hit was, I think, for the full year, $7 million. But for Klingberg, he may have shown enough that he gets a more long-term deal from somebody else out there on the free agent market. Do we see Klingberg back?
No, 100%. I think he's gone. He is definitely looking for that longer type of deal. He couldn't get it last time. And so, Anaheim was desperate to have somebody, they
the appropriate word.
Exactly. And, they gave him that, heck of amount of money for one season. So, I think he's looking for more, more years than dollars. But it's it's too bad. He looked decent. He was such a polarizing player with this fan base, but he's a good power play guy. So there will be teams looking for his services for sure.
Final highlight for him of the season was being taken for a ride by Rupe Hintz on the first goal of the game for the Stars in Game 6. Full 360.
That was Finn on Swede crime there. That was Rupe Hintz was in and one mode. That was crazy.
Rupe Hintz was trying to end a postseason series by himself.
Yeah, it was incredible. That's what number one centers do.
Yeah,
they love to do it against the Wild for sure.
Matt Dumba. The writing is pretty much on the wall for this one. It's been talked about a lot, and I think more likely that we don't see Dumba back because of how he played down the stretch. He found some game that we hadn't seen in a few years down the stretch, just with how physical he was. And it really seemed like he was trying to kind of enjoy the moment in stride. But I think that play has led to him probably finding some more money on the free agent market and probably a multi-year deal, which is something I don't think the Wilds can afford.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. I think he's gone. He knows that there's other teams watching him too. They can see this tape, and it was some of the best that he's played in a Wild uniform. And so, it's going to be weird to not have him on the team. I think that fight where he got in when he got in the fight with Matthew Tkachuk. It's weird to say when he was in Calgary. And he just tore his pectoral muscle, and I just don't think he was ever the same. When he was drafted, he was kind of supposed to be like Brent Burns and this high flying offensive defenseman, and it really changed after the injury, which was unfortunate. But he was playing some of his best hockey when he was paired with Jonas Brodin down the stretch there, and so he was such an important person to the organization off the ice as well. And so it's going to be weird to not have him on the team, but they have Brock Faber as the replacement. And say what you want to say about Jonas Brodin and Jared Spurgeon, two stalwarts on the defense. Brock Faber ended up being one of the best defensemen, probably better than those two in the series. I mean, he saved that one game by blocking the Marchment shot, and he looked like a multi-year veteran, and he had only a couple games of NHL experience prior to the playoffs, and he was incredible in his first go around in the playoffs. And he's only 20, and it's the future is extremely bright for Brock.
And he's a player that I think you slot into the lineup and you just accept that, yeah, there are going to be some moments where you think, okay, that's something that a rookie would do. But like, I don't think there's any way that you can pull him out of the lineup and say, all right, you got to go get your minutes in down in Iowa.
No, he is up here for the rest of his career for sure.
Yeah, he's not moving. So there are a few others. There are some bigger names to discuss, and so we'll finish today's episode by taking a look at some of the names that are in house right now that may not be come next year. All of that coming up here on Locked on Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. Again, thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Smashed the monthly downloads record for the month of April. Back-to-back months, in fact, in which this show hit over 50,000 downloads, which is just its video game numbers. And it's because of everybody that tunes in, whether it's your first time listening or whether you have been with us since the beginning. Thank you for continuing to tune in. And we will continue to pump out the content for you throughout the rest of the playoffs, throughout the offseason, all leading up to the start of next season, sometime in October. Continuing to just look at some of the names with Alex Micheletti here today of players who may or may not be back. We probably should discuss Brandon Duhaime because myself being the president of the fan club, I would like to see him back because I think he offers a lot of versatility, and you've seen a nice bump in his overall game from his rookie season to this year. And so I would say I would put him in the going to be back because you could probably do something similar to Connor Dewar's deal, which is not going to cost you a ton, but those guys play pivotal roles on this team. They help out on the penalty kill. That fourth line is one that is important. And so I would like to see him back. Do you think we end up seeing Dewey 1 back on this team?
Yeah, he's a unique player. Bill Guerin loves him. He's the Energizer Bunny on the team. And, like you mentioned, he fits into multiple roles. He's not your typical fourth line grinder. He has some speed. He plays with an edge, which we love to see. And he doesn't go over the edge too. And so, if you need somebody to fight, he's there to stick up for his teammates too. And so he brings that element as well. And, he's a great locker room guy. No, you don't have to worry about him off the ice. And so that's a guy that you want on your team. And, hopefully they can, meet in the middle there of what they want to do.
I think the telling part is that his hits stayed. Now, he did miss some games this year, but his hits stayed at relatively the same clip, and his penalties dropped substantially, which tells you that you've got a guy that knows how to use that physical piece without going overboard. And that's valuable for the 6th most penalized team in the NHL, 3rd most last year. So little improvement. For a team that is as penalized as much as the Wild have been, that's valuable. So would like to see him be back. The most interesting one, I think, and there's a reason that I saved this for towards the end, Calen Addison. because I could see it going either way. I really don't know if he ends up being dealt, if he maybe asks for a number in an extension that the Wild aren't comfortable with. I'm not sure which way this goes.
Yeah, I think he could almost go to his agents and say, "Just find me a trade, find me a team that wants me." It's when they traded for John Klingberg, the writing was on the wall for Calen. I mean, even at the end of the season, there they had him playing forward for a game, just because they were in desperate need, and they were resting people. But it just when they don't trust you in the playoffs, that's a big sign. There's another name that we haven't brought up in Marco Rossi too. When a guy like Eriksson Ek is out and they need a center and they don't call you up, in your first round draft pick and you're not playing, it opens eyes. It's those are two guys that are going to have to prove themselves. If they don't trade Addison, it's a gigantic year for him and
Yes.
Marco Rossi. They need to have big summers. They both need to get stronger and faster. It's just the battle level has to be so much. It's different. The NHL is different than the AHL. We can say it with Rossi. You point per game down there. It's a different beast up here. You're playing against grown men, huge guys. Calen is smaller. It's just the offense is there for him, but there's a reason he was minus 17 on the ice. I know plus minus people hate it, but it's a factor. You're out there, and so you're out there for goals against, and that it happened way too many times near at the end of the season there. And so yeah, big summers for both. I think they could get something for Calen Addison because he's still young enough, and so. Yeah, the money's going to be tight, so somebody's going to have to go. And most likely, if it's not him, it's going to be some other of the lower pairing defensemen, John Merrill, Alex Goligoski. There's one team that always can save the day for the Wild if they're looking to shed money, and is to call up Arizona, because they. As we know, it's a fugazi. It's like a Ponzi scheme down there. They'll just stick injured guys on their team, or they need the money to get to the cap floor. It's embarrassing, but you can always call up them and maybe send Goligoski back to Arizona.
Well, and the Goligoski contract is an interesting one to watch because he's got the same provision in his that Marc-Andre Fleury has in his contract, in that if he retires, the Wild are not on the hook for any of that money. And he played here and there down the stretch, like the second half of the season. But when he did play in like a bunch of games stacked together, not particularly good. And so honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if Bill Guerin looks to move one of those guys, just because you've got the Brock Faber spot. So somebody has to come out. And yes, Dumba is being taken out of that 6 as well. But I go back to what we saw from a guy like Dakota Mermis. And yes, it was only for 2 games. Just stepped in and looked fine. You can find guys to fill a bottom third, like your bottom pairing defenseman. You can find guys anywhere to do that.
100%.
Cheap. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if that portion gets shaken up, considering that Merrill played while Klingberg was hurt. And then as soon as Klingberg was ready to come back, Merrill was out of the lineup and never to be heard from again.
John Merrill was not playing well down the stretch. He was getting walked by guys and taking really dumb penalties, and so his taking his money off the books would be great. It's giving me deja vu of Dmitry Kulikov vibes, and I can't believe they were able to trade him. And so maybe look for another team that somehow, Bill Guerin pulling a Houdini and getting Merrill off the books would be huge. It's there's guys in Iowa that are hungry, ready for spots too. I look at a guy like Damon Hunt. He looks like he could make the next step, and so got Carson Lambos too. So yeah, there's a lot of exciting defensive prospects in Iowa that are ready to to make the next jump too.
Yeah, and let's not forget too that one of the moves that didn't end up happening that was a surprise was that the Wild were in on Ryan McDonough when Tampa Bay was trying to move on from him, and so this again is kind of the Bill Guerin special, is that there are a few things that we assume that the Wild are in on, like on the surface level in front of the camera. He's got 5 or 6 things going on behind the scenes that we don't hear about until like the very last minute or until after the fact. And so there, I think with the limited funds available via free agency, I think we will see some trades this offseason to try to free up money or to try to, well, we'll give you this player and take this player on with maybe a minimal addition of salary cap taken on or a slight reduction. I think that's the way that we'll see this team have pieces added in as we go.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there could be some shocking moves too. You could ask some guys to try to move no trade clauses. Maybe ask Matt Zuccarello. Would he be willing to get moved, or take a look at a guy like Marcus Foligno. I know he's beloved by this team's fan base, but he had a really rough postseason, and so money's going to have to come from somewhere. I would love for them to be able to re-sign Nyquist and Marcus Hansen. Those are very skilled guys, but they were really productive at the end there, and there's a lot of teams that could use those two services, and so hopefully they can try to keep them. It'd be really nice. I was even impressed by Oscar Sundqvist for for the little amount of time he was here. He scored a goal in the one game he was in against Dallas, and then was never heard from again too, which was unfortunate. But he's won a cup, and you always want to have guys that have had success in this league, and having cup winners is huge. It's invaluable for a team.
Ryan Reeves too, another guy that could potentially be looked at as returning. So no shortage of questions to answer. The book may be more full than last year's question booklet was at the end of the year, but we'll have you covered every step of the way. We'll do the player evals. We're also going to do a series here in the off season that one of the listeners mentioned on YouTube that I just have been waiting for the opportunity to do, and just taking a look at like how members of the Minnesota Wild roster, how they got here, kind of a getting to know them type series. So we'll do that as well here in the off season too. But that will do it for today's episode. So again, thank you for taking the time to make Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. If this is your first time listening to the show, we welcome you in, and make sure you take the time to subscribe on YouTube and follow on your favorite podcast platforms. If you are one of the everydayers that listen to this show on a daily basis, we'll talk to you again tomorrow. But either way, we've got fresh content for you with new episodes every Monday through Friday, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network.